Do you know where to find your family history research records online to help you with your family tree? I'm not talking necessarily about Ancestry and FamilySearch and some of the big houses, but we'll talk about some of those. But what I'm talking about is a little bit beyond that. Now, Ancestry and FamilySearch, those guys, they're all great, but you know, they're not the only ones out there. So say you have a research question in mind and you would like to know where to find the records that you seek, but you're not really sure where to look or what's available out there. So where do you look? There are 5 parts to the genealogical proof standard, also known as the GPS, and the very first one is reasonably exhaustive research. Now, we're not really going to talk about the GPS today, but you know, as part of our attempt to prove our lineage, you know, we need to be turning over every rock. So as much as I love Ancestry and FamilySearch, we need to know where all the records are and where to find them. Today, we are talking about free Ancestry record resources beyond, and in some cases including, the typical places you would look like Ancestry.com and FamilySearch.org. These resources are also affectionately referred to as clearinghouses by our special guest today. But more on her in a moment. If this is your first time here, my name is Connie Knox. I am a lifelong genealogist, here to help you go further faster and factually with your family research. Now, don't forget that Genealogy TV has a website, a newsletter, and a Facebook page. You can find links for all of that in the show notes below. Don't forget to subscribe. There's a subscribe button right there. You can subscribe and ring the bell so that you don't miss a thing. And if you really like the videos that we're putting out here and you're learning something, you find some value in it, consider becoming a channel member. You can do so by clicking the join button, and you can learn a little bit more about it there. This is a footnotes episode, and well, I call it footnotes because it's in the footnotes where the real sources are. So we welcome back Diane Richard, a professional genealogist out of the Raleigh area. She is the publisher of the North Carolina Genealogical Society Journal and the owner of Mosaic Research and Project Management, also known as Mosaic RPM. Well, she's a regular here on Genealogy TV, and we can't wait to hear more about what she has to tell us. But if you're looking for Diane, you can find her at mosaicrpm.com. She is a wealth of knowledge, and she is sharing with us today, including a free downloadable handout. So stick around. We'll let you know how to get a link to that document here shortly. So let's get to it. Diane, welcome back again. I suckered you into another episode. Thank you so much. You have more online resources for us. And, well, I can't wait to jump into it.
Well, thank you. You know, how can I say, I love talking. That's never a problem. And talking about online resources just ups the game for me. So I appreciate being back.
All right. Well, why don't you go ahead and share your screen?
All right.
Okay, I see web clearinghouses. What exactly do you mean by that?
Okay, so I coined this term web clearinghouses, just trying to figure out how to group some of these resources. And what they are is they are websites that don't contain any of the information themselves. So they're clearinghouses for information found elsewhere. So these are websites that what has happened is the individuals or groups of individuals running these websites, they have gone out and scoured the website to find content that is relevant. And then what they have done is put links on their website. And when you click on a link, you're always going to be taken to another website. So that's why I call them clearinghouses. They're not like an Ancestry or FamilySearch or Internet Archive or Google Books where there's actually content right there. What they're trying to do is make a clearinghouse for you so that you can go there, do one-stop shopping in a way, and then get to a whole bunch of great information. I'm going to start by talking about one of my favorite places that I still think of is a hidden gem to many. And that's a website called Linkpendium.
What exactly is Linkpendium?
Well, it's a compendium of links. I thought that was pretty good. I had not thought about that until you asked, you know. I'm pretty good at coming up with an answer. What this is it is one of my when I'm doing a project, and even if it's a project in a county and a state that I have researched even a month ago, I will still often start at this website to see what resources are available. And again, this is a clearinghouse. Its strength are the United States. The key thing to know about it is that for every county in every state and US possession, you will find the same kinds of information listed and collected. So let me show it to you. I know this is a little small because there's a ton of information here. So if I'm looking at Henrico County, Virginia, but this could be any county in any state, again, in the United States, what you're going to find is that there are a list of topics. And these topics beyond projects are alphabetical by record type. And every page will typically have every kind of record type. But I also want to point out it also mentions adjacent counties. So that's a great geographical clue for us, because often we have to remember our families did not just stay in one county their whole lives and never step foot out of it to be recorded in a document someplace else. In fact, many people live in one county, they're buried in another. They live in one county, they work in another, etc. That hasn't changed. That's always been true through time. So that's just a great contextual element. But all of the rest of these you're going to find are different types of records. And what you're going to see is, in this case, Bible records. There's just one page on a GenWeb that's called Bible records. So if I click on this, it's going to take me to that GenWeb page, and I will see those Bible records. Now, notice for this category, cemeteries, the link is actually the title cemeteries. So if I click on that, it's going to take me to a whole page of then cemetery listings.
Wonderful.
And so if we keep going, court, directories, estate records, immigration, land, lookup services, mailing lists, which would be some of the old message boards, which we sometimes talk about, newspapers, and you have both newspaper records and obituaries and funeral homes, so they've kept those separate. Because sometimes you have obituary lists created by a library that aren't linked directly to the newspaper records, but they tell you, for example, what newspaper it's in. Photographs, postcards, and historical. I love this category because I often don't have family pictures from my family. I don't know even what my family looked like, never mind the town they lived in or the churches they went to, etc. So I love looking at historical images because they're going to give me a way to visualize what a community might have looked at when my ancestors were there. You have societies, so you could join tax lists, vital records, I think you can see from the breadth of this. Now, this is every county for every state in the United States. And they don't just do Ancestry, they don't just do FamilySearch, they don't just do RootsWeb, GenWeb, etc. They will do state level institutions, they will do county level, they will do private if they find a private person who's created a page. So they really put actually quite a lot of effort into first creating this list, but then think about having to maintain all those URLs as those websites change.
Yes, I was just sitting here thinking, how do all these sites survive? I mean, in some cases, some of these have, ads and stuff, but I just don't know how people do this. It's just amazing to me. Things like Find a Grave, though, we know, is really volunteer run, and everybody runs around and takes pictures of tombstones and such. But places like this, it just kind of blows my mind at how they manage to stay on top of it and still earn a living. I don't know we have the answer to that.
It's labors of love, and we definitely are able to take advantage of it, and that's part of what I do is I try to create awareness, figuring that hopefully something will come out of that, and a lot of these places will accept donations and things along those lines. But
yes, so we need to support these folks.
Yes, and I just wanted to hear that when I clicked on newspaper records, I just want you to look at the breadth of the newspaper records for Henrico County. You have the Library of Congress, which is part of the Chronicling America project, but you also have things like Google News Archive, which we could do a whole thing on newspapers because I love
I love newspaper research.
Newspaper archive, newspapers.com, paper of record, newspaper abstract. I mean, and this doesn't even tell us every newspaper source, but what it does too is it reminds me of where some of these things are. Because I will forget, you know, you get so used to looking at your same top 10 favorite resources sometimes, right? And then I'll look on here and go, and that happened to me for Google News Archive. I had just slipped my mind and I went looking there and it happened to have a newspaper I was looking for to look for obituaries in, which I found.
Absolutely.
And it was like,
newspapers are one of my very favorite.
Yes, they're lots of fun. And I just want to actually, two things I want to point out is notice at the end of every page, you're going to have, please add your favorite websites to this page. So they are asking us as users, if we happen to know of a website that they don't have listed, to drop them a message. Because, you know, as we said, every county and every state and territory, that's a lot of territory they're covering. And it literally by 2 people.
Wow.
And they happen to have a Facebook page called Linkpendium. And I recommend that if you're on Facebook that you like that page, because then they'll sometimes put notifications about, hey, we've done a big update and purge and cleaning recently, or we've added a whole bunch of links to someplace, or, you know, things along that line. And it's just another way to support them by getting news about the project as they're doing it. But this is my #1 go-to. I'm starting to do research in a community and I want to have a good handle on what resources are going to be more readily available to me. And what you're going to find sometimes is for some counties, it's a little tiny list because there's just not necessarily been a lot that has been digitized at all. And there's not these private projects and there's not been the newspapers, but then you know that. And I think that's good information because if I know that a lot has, or hardly anything has been digitized, I know I'm going to have to do my research more the old-fashioned way. You know, so I'm going to have to do more on-the-ground research.
If it's a really tiny little community, even a crossroads area, right? Like it's not really even an official town of any type, I will look it up in the like a gazetteer or something and try and find out what other communities are around that little tiny community and do the same kind of research for each of those a little bit larger, because that's probably where they went to the courthouse, or that's probably where they went to, you know, do business. And there might be more information in those surrounding little, not counties, but surrounding little towns that are a little bit bigger than the little tiny crossroads or the little back creek or whatever area.
Yeah. And the other aspect of that is all it takes is one person who that's their community. They want to get everything they can out there, and you will find, I have seen small communities that have way more available information than a lot of other places that are much bigger. Because one passionate volunteer or a library that's their priority, that's the thing you find too. A local community library will go, I'm going to digitize as much as I can. And one example there's a couple examples that come to mind in North Carolina, the New Bern Craven County Library has put tremendous amount of material online because that's been a priority for that library. And, you know, that's not the biggest place across the state by any stretch of the imagination. And yet it probably has one of the best resources online put out by a library for that county, you know, for a county. So, you know, passionate individuals. And that's what's nice is I love that Linkpendium doesn't focus on just big projects. And I love that they do those neighboring counties so that, and since this is at the county level, like when I'm looking at newspapers, I may have my community that I'm interested in, or, you know, I may look at the Henrico County, whatever, but I do know Richmond is in the heart of Henrico County. So I know a lot of news is going to end up in a Richmond newspaper, even if in Virginia, they have this interesting thing where you have your cities are separate from your counties. Sometimes, you know, you have certain cities that are standalone cities. So Richmond is a standalone city, but it happens to be in what historically was Henrico County. And so you need to look at both places.
So think of it this way too, for the audience at home. Look at the difference that one person can make for future generations, long after we're gone, if someone gets passionate about that kind of stuff and really says, I'm going to take my little community and put everything I can find out, I'm going to go talk to my neighbors or whatever, and they just make it that's their mission, that this little town is going to survive in records collected together in places like this. This is really inspiring.
It is, and I marvel at some of the materials that we can find, and it's all based on one person.
Wonderful. All right, I know you have another list.
Yes, so now this is a list many of you may be more familiar with, and I want to talk about it both to remind people of it, but also to talk a bit about how it's different from Linkpendium. Because I know more people are familiar with Cyndi's list. I have a tendency to use Linkpendium more than Cyndi's list, but there's a reason for that, and so I want to talk about that a little bit. So here we have Cyndi's list. Cyndi's list is probably one of the oldest of this type website around. I don't remember exactly when Linkpendium was formed. I think it was a little bit after this. And what's kind of different about Cyndi's list is Cyndi has things organized, for example, by state level, and then she has topics. So when you go into Cyndi's list, and you can search on it, or you can just kind of jump around and navigate. So if I want to look at something, I can look at Alabama, but most of what's going to be listed is going to be at a state level. So I'm not going to get to the county level. Now, we do want to look at state level records. And Linkpendium also has state level records. I just didn't focus on that for them, for that particular site, because I love the county records so much.
Okay.
And then you have topics. So you have these related topic things. And what you can see here is if I look at the state of Virginia, because we've been talking Henrico, then you do have all these different topics. And this list does somewhat parallel what Linkpendium has in terms of topics. You know, you've got newspapers, you've got obituaries. It has a few topics Linkpendium doesn't have, and vice versa. Again, it's now at the state level, and again, it's focused on topics. So let's talk a little bit about basically how I use these two websites a little bit differently.
I love good strategies.
Okay, so this is my little summary of my Linkpendium and Cyndi's list world. So Linkpendium, it's organized by state, and then by county, and then by record type. When we look at Cyndi's list, we find information organized typically at the state level or then topics. And at the state level, you still have topics, but it's not county level. So it's a higher level list of resources. Now, Linkpendium is mostly US, and it does have a bit of UK and surname resources. Cyndi's list is more worldwide. So if I'm doing more international research, I have a tendency to go to Cyndi's list first. If I am doing more US-based research, I invariably go to Linkpendium first. Now, Linkpendium, when you're doing US research, I find it really good for identifying locality-specific data. Again, that county level. And it's not just county level, because obviously under the county, it's going to list resources for certain communities within that county. Now, Cyndi's list I don't find as good for identifying locality-specific data. You know, it's harder for me to zoom in on Cyndi's list and get down to those very Henrico-specific tax lists, for example, at that county level. On the other side, though, Linkpendium, it's not as good for historical context. You know, Linkpendium is very data-driven, so I find that the information on there is really good for accessing data, but if I'm looking for a historical topic, then I have a tendency to go to Cyndi's list, because Cyndi's list has a lot more historical context links on it. So if I'm trying to look for church histories or religious archives or a certain ethnic group, etc., I'm going to go here to try to research that historical topic. So that's kind of my personal dividing line about how I use Linkpendium and Cyndi's list. They each have their strengths, and so I check them out in different ways.
That is a really great chart. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, I'm happy to do that. I'm glad I hope it makes sense.
All right, so you know, one of the places that I go to a lot is Family Search, and I do my locality research a lot of times through Family Search. So how does this differ from that?
So what happens is Family Search with its Wikipedia. It's basically, it has its wiki, a Family Search wiki, and you can go to that wiki and you can research on each state within the union and find out what records are available. What I find is because it's a wiki, it's very contingent on who compiled the information. So I'll go look in some counties in some states and the page is empty. You know, you see all the headings on the wiki where it says birth records, church records, census record, and we're talking there's nothing. There's no links, nothing. So that's not helpful to me. So I will go then to Linkpendium, because I do like Family Search's wiki page. I do like to use it, but on some of those pages, you literally find nothing. You're never going to find nothing on Linkpendium, because it's always going to link to something, because they intentionally went to every county, again, of every state, and then each of the possessions, where the wiki for Family Search, it's volunteers who are submitting that information. Now, sometimes on Family Search, I will find the most detailed pages with these great links to things that I then need to I kind of correlate it with Linkpendium. If you know, so I always start with one or the other. I start with Linkpendium just because I know it covers every single location I'm interested in, but I do always look at Family Search because I know that there can be incredible gems there. Because what you'll sometimes find on Family Search are links to articles and publications. So that's something kind of different. Linkpendium has a tendency to point to database roots, you know, so you see how it's a little bit different, where then Family Search pages, people will sometimes put those links to those articles in William and Mary, or they'll mention that in this edition of William and Mary, we find the tax records abstracted for these very early years. You're not going to find that at Linkpendium. So I do both.
Yeah,
I typically...
That's exactly where I was going next, is just like you turn over every rock regarding records, here you can turn over every rock regarding sources of sources, you know? I mean,
yes, yeah. Definitely. And that's what I do, because none of them are perfect. They're all made by people providing information. They all have a slightly different focus and purpose. And I figure it's always worth the time to check them both out, and I will invariably find information on both of them that's unique.
Okay. Thank you.
In fact, you're kind of leading into my next topic, which is I'm going to show you a little bit of Family Search Wiki.
Oh, super.
So like Wikipedia, which many of you may be familiar with, Family Search has what it's calling its wiki, which Connie and I were talking about in terms of how they're different. And so I'm going to show it to you a little bit and just reiterate a few things. So bear with me. It's the teacher inside me. I was always taught, tell somebody you're going to tell them, and then tell them that you told them. so you probably notice I do have a tendency to do that. So a wiki is basically a website that's collaborative editing. And that's important to keep in mind, because as we mentioned, some of them are really detailed and some of them really aren't. And so the quality is different too. So I just want you to know, it's kind of buyer beware. You're getting access to free information that some people have put out there, and so appreciate that. This typical wiki page, and this I did for Henrico County, since the other examples have been from there. The structure of the contents is going to be the same or close to the same for every single page. So again, what's nice about it is, just like Linkpendium, it's organized at the county level, and it's also organized by topics that are listed alphabetically. So there's a lot of overlap between the two of them. Now, the wiki for Family Search will also include maps, which I like, because it gives you the big map showing you where the state is. It gives you the state map showing you where the county is, and then it shows you where the county is also. So it does have some nice visual cues. Now, the other thing to remember is that this is on the FamilySearch platform. So the material that is going to be covered by far the best are going to be FamilySearch records. So if there are FamilySearch records easily accessible, you typically will find a lot of links to those. But it doesn't limit itself to FamilySearch records.
So true.
So
stuff for ancestry on there and all kinds of different places.
That's what I mean. You find all kinds of things. Now, the other thing I like about the FamilySearch Wiki, and this is a reason I actually sometimes go to the FamilySearch Wiki first versus Linkpendium. So Linkpendium, I go to find out what resources are available or newly available for a county. Now, FamilySearch, I will go to first if it's a new to me county. So I may be researching in a county that I'm not as familiar with its history, because what I like about it is at the very top, it gives you typically a summary of the beginning dates for major records. That's number one. It gives you a history of it and the parent county, so you can keep track of those county formation issues that are important to us, of making sure you're looking in the right place at the right time for the right records. It will talk about if there are any big boundary changes. And it also will always talk about if there are extensive record losses. So this is great contextual information to have before I've even looked at a record, because I want to, sometimes I'll read here and it'll go, it is missing every courthouse record, you know, for 100 years. Okay, well, I guess courthouse records are not going to be the thing that I'm going to focus on, because I have a slim chance that they survive. So what alternative records might I need to look at? So this is something that is typically very well done on the FamilySearch wiki pages. And have you found the same, Connie?
Well, yeah, and this is it. You said it. You took the words right out of my mouth. This is my first stop if it's a new to me county or
Yes.
a new to me area, because this is exactly where I go when I'm going, okay, when did the borders change? That's one of the first things I'm always looking for, is when did the borders change?
Yeah. And for me, record losses.
Yes.
You know, so those two things, because Connie and I know you don't want to be looking for records that don't survive, and you don't want to be looking in the wrong place for records. You could just waste a lot of time, and you know, we don't have all that much time. I mean, you know, it's one of those things. So, and I just wanted to show you that. So if I keep clicking, you'll often, these are some of the other categories as we work down, again, alphabetical. You'll often have some great African-American resources pointed out. Sorry, that was not very good. And what I like under census is they don't just focus on the federal censuses. You'll also find out if there's city censuses, state level census, those in between censuses, those censuses that are really a substitute for tax records that have been lost. And then I'll bring up, I look, those are things, the two categories I often look at first are census records and tax records. Because, you know, from Ancestry, FamilySearch, and some of the other places we regularly visit, I know I'm going to get a pretty good handle on your typical census records, possibly probate records, etc. But you don't see as many tax records or some of those other in-between censuses. Another category that is handled with good depth on the FamilySearch Wiki are church records. And this county is a good example, because sometimes you just find Church of England and nothing else. You know, if you're looking at a colonial county, they just don't even pretend to try to go beyond that. So you'll pretty much have that. But you can see here that they tried to develop a discussion about some of the early Baptist churches, and also Huguenot, and then the Quaker. You know, they looked beyond Church of England being the state religion of the time. And the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is what FamilySearch is affiliated with. So you can find just some incredible detail here. And as I put, and much more, because you can see I'm only up to church records, which was letter C. So on this list over here, it was right here. So there's all these other categories of information. So you just have to go and, you know, let your fingers do the walking, as they say. I guess we don't have physical phone books anymore, but I still think my fingers walking on my keys, right? Is that not the same? Okay, I dated Connie and I again. I do that every talk.
Thanks a lot.
I haven't started talking about rotary phones or some other thing. So, you know.
Oh, I'm sure
we could come up with we could probably come up with a few more.
Yeah. Oh, never mind. I could go on with, you know, phone numbers that started with RI9 or whatever.
And do you know, I still know the phone number for the house I grew up in.
Me too.
But I cannot tell you my husband's cell phone number. Because it's always been a number in my phone. I just click on it, you know, his name.
I think as kids, it was beaten into us because that was the only way. If you got picked up by the police or something happened in an accident or something, how, you know, it was our address and phone number from the time I was old enough to walk and talk. We memorized that.
Nope. It's still in my head. So I'm going to be, you know, later on in life, just repeating that phone number and nobody's going to know what it means.
Well, you know, I have to say FamilySearch is probably in the top 3 for me as far as being able to find something quickly. It's well organized, and you can drill in right to what you need right away. So I'm a big fan of FamilySearch's wiki, no doubt, as I'm sure anybody who's watched more than one of my episodes knows that.
Yeah, and like I said, keep Linkpendium in mind, just because some of the FamilySearch pages just aren't as strong. I mean, this one is. I showed you an example of a really well done one.
Well, you got some other gems in your list here, I know.
I do, and I have to say my next one surprises me. A few years ago, I would not have included this. A website I wouldn't have talked about a few years ago because I really wasn't sure what it was going to become when it grew up. And now it's something I'm including here because I do think it's a great clearinghouse, a web clearinghouse type website, and that's the Digital Public Library of America. Again, we're still talking clearinghouse type sites. And what I want to show you is this is the entry page, or it was at the time I took the screenshot. It has links to over 35 million images, texts, and videos and sounds. And the large majority of those are images and texts. And again, it's a clearinghouse. So everything you find on here is not something housed on here, but as it's called, it's the Digital Public Library of America. So what it does is it includes material that is housed elsewhere. But what's nice is you can search in this one location for these materials. And sticking with Henrico County, what you're seeing here is I did a search on it, and this tells me that there were over 400 items tagged for Henrico County. And what I want you to see is it's a mix of images, maps, and documents. So that's kind of nice because when we're sometimes looking at those other websites, you have to go source by source, right? If I'm looking for newspapers, I gotta go to a newspaper. If I'm looking for images, I have to find an image site. If I'm looking for documents, I have to go through the FamilySearch digitized archives, or I have to look at what North Carolina's you know, you're having to discreetly look for a particular type of resource. Where from the Digital Public Library of America, what it has done is brought together all these formats coming from all these different entities. And what you can do is on the left, you can see a subject category. So you can focus on a particular subject. You can also under type say, I just want to look at images. Because sometimes I just want to look at images. I want to see what images there might be, so I'll do that. You can also put dates in here to limit the time frame. Because you might say, you know, my family only lived there from 1920 to 1940. So let me put 1920 to 1940. So the images that come up are going to be they're going to show me the community as what my ancestors would have seen at that time. The time when they were living there. I've used this
site a lot in my storytelling. So especially for some of the videos that I produce for the YouTube channel. For example, I see that there's the Transcontinental Railroad there. I use this site a lot to discover video and images of the building of the Transcontinental Railroad as part of that migration video I did a while back. And so it's a great place to find community information and historical information. I really like it.
Yeah, and you know, like I said, when it first came out years ago, my first thoughts, to be honest, were, do we really need another just sort of clearinghouse platformy sort of thing? Because I was writing for this for Internet Genealogy literally right when it first opened, because I always write about internet, you know, new internet resources. And I remember kind of ending with, well, we'll have to see where it goes, because at that time it just wasn't robust. And now, like I said, I'm including it in a talk because I use this regularly, because I like the fact that it's culling different types of materials together, but under one topic that I'm looking for. I'll put in people's names, I'll put in county names, I'll put in names of a landmark, institutions,
Community
and
names,
it could
yeah.
just and the other thing I want to share is, when you have something like this, and it's the same for Linkpendium, it's the same for FamilySearch Wiki, when you find a source that's new to you, go directly to that source and just explore it on its own. You know, use this not only to find, for example, this document right here, but when I know where that document's from, go explore that website. Because for all of these websites, they're still only culling certain kinds of information. But if you find one document for your community on a website, who knows what else may be on that same website that doesn't fall into the categories, you know, that the wiki have or that Linkpendium use.
Great stuff. You got more tricks up your sleeve, though, I know, because I've kind of seen the list.
I was going to say, Connie is not reading my mind. She probably would not want to do that. It would be a bit cluttered, but she has seen my list.
I don't want to get into that.
That could be a whole other discussion going on here. So
that would probably make a really popular YouTube channel, though.
Oh my gosh, I could imagine we could have a lot of fun, depending how people interpret fun sometimes. So, but this category I call giant catalogs. How do you like that for a sophisticated term?
I like it.
But I call them giant catalogs because they're just kind of like the places that we learn of the existence of material. So we've been talking about resources where you're getting links to material, right? That material's online, you can read it, you can look at it, etc. An issue as genealogists that we've had historically has been just knowing the existence of something. You know, does it even exist out there? Can we find it? And so I'm going to talk about two big catalogs. WorldCat, again, has a very simple interface, and that's something I kind of want you to also appreciate, is that you don't have to have sophisticated, glitzy, shiny interfaces to sometimes have a really powerful tool at your fingertips. And what WorldCat is a huge, giant library catalog. So think about I'm updating some of us again, old physical card catalogs you had to use at the library. You always had to go into a library and then look up something under whatever system they had everything filed, you know, whatever Dewey Decimal, alphabet, just whatever system it was to find things. And you could only look at your catalog. You physically had to be at the library to look at the catalog. Well, what has happened is in WorldCat, you have catalogs literally around the world that are participating. There's more than 10,000 of them already involved. And what they have in essence done is they're sharing their catalog with WorldCat. What WorldCat is it's basically a huge library card catalog of over 10,000 libraries worldwide. Wow. So what has happened is these libraries have provided their catalogs so that now, instead of us having to individually search our local catalog in person, I can sit at home at my laptop and I can search a world to see what exists for my topic of interest. So here's an example of Henrico County and finding books. Because what happens is I'm often researching the county that's not where I live and where I can't necessarily access information. And I want to find out two things. One is what books have been published, because as we mentioned previously, looking at published material is easier than looking at original material as a start point, because it's going to be indexed, somebody's going to have pulled information, it's typewritten. There's a lot of advantages to always looking at books first. That's what I do. I always look for published material first, then I go to original material as makes sense. And what happens is, so I found this book, Marriage Bonds of Henrico County. So this is up in Virginia, it's the Richmond area. What WorldCat does is it has my location. So I think I have a little arrow there. Notice you can enter your location. So I put in my code of where I'm living, or you can put in the zip code of the nearest big library, whatever makes sense to you. Then what it does is, working from where I live outward, it basically tells me what libraries have that book. And it ends up in this case that the Wake County Public Library System, which is my library system, has this book. Not even the state library has this book, but the Wake County Library. So I'm good. I can find it. It's right here. Now, if I didn't have it in Wake County, notice the next closest library is up at Danville, Virginia. So it's up at the North Carolina, Virginia border, in essence.
This is one of my favorite sources for finding books like this. I've discovered, while I thought the only place it would be is at the archives in Raleigh, and I find out it's at the local university. It's like,
yes. Well, also, you know, those little private books that were published by families, right? You don't know where they got. And sometimes my thought is, great, it's going to be in the Library of Congress and no place else, because a lot of people put things to the Library of Congress because they want to make sure it gets registered there and in perpetuity. Well, we're not going to all drive up to DC to go visit the Library of Congress. So then I like looking here because I'll realize there's actually 5 versions of this book.
If you're going on a road trip and you're planning, I did a whole episode on this. If you're planning your road trip, this is one of the places you want to go, because if you're headed over to another state or another county or whatever to do research, you can find out what's at that library over there.
Yes. I mean, it's just, it saves you so much headache. I mean, that's ultimately what it comes down to, because too many people go to libraries assuming the content held by there, and now we can search on it. We don't have to guess, we don't have to wonder, we can find out. But the other neat part about it is when you look up the information on this book, there's something called the OCLC number on it. So each book has an OCLC number. Some books have multiple ones because, unfortunately, with 10,000 libraries, they didn't always recognize that a book was already cataloged. So you get the same book cataloged 4 different times. So just take that with a grain of salt. So it's easy enough to check. You see the title of the book, it shows up once, it shows up 5 times. Now this OCLC number is a number you can share with your library and say, could you please interlibrary loan this book for me? So if your library provides interlibrary loan book services, they will want the title, the author, and this OCLC number, because that allows them to cut directly into the chase in terms of, where is this book available? Now, something to recognize. If you do a search on a book, or you find a book and you go, wow, I need that book, that is my family. Sometimes I find that that is held in 2 libraries, literally, because it was a small published book, or it's aged poorly, or, you know, we don't know, but there's only 2 copies. There's only 2 copies across all the libraries. Odds are you're not going to be able to get it through interlibrary loan. That said, have your library still request interlibrary loan, because what some libraries will do is they will offer to copy the cover page and the index. Or if you know there's a particular page in that book, they will arrange for a digital copy of that particular page. Or if you have a quick lookup for a really unusual name, you know, don't say I'm looking for every Smith in the county, but if you said I'm looking for a really unique name, I mean, the Beckham name, I'll just say Beckham, because that's a name that's not real common. They might actually be willing to do the title page, the index, and the 3 entries they found for you. And sometimes they'll do it for free, and sometimes they'll say, what's this worth to you? You know, are you willing to pay a couple of bucks to get it? So keep in mind, it doesn't cost you anything to pursue getting this information, and you may just find that you get a PDF sent to you with the information you want.
I discovered while on a tour at ECU's library, it's Eastern Carolina University, I think they offer a service where if it's a rare book that's not been digitized, if you're willing to pay for it, to have it digitized, and it's like 100, 150 bucks, you can get that digitized. Then they give you a digitized copy of it if it's not in copyright infringement issues. And then that digital copy that you paid for is your donation to the world and becomes part of their online library.
And actually, when I talk about my next item, it's going to be a similar version of the same thing, which I have done with ECU. It's just going to be involving manuscripts versus books. So, you know, what my premise has become over the last so many years, I don't know if it's becoming grumpy older lady or something or whatever, but I always ask. I figure it never hurts to ask. And I have learned there's a lot of stuff you can get support from libraries and archives by asking. I mean, yeah, sometimes they say, no, we can't do it, we can't support it. But often for a fee, and trust me, the fee compared to you driving someplace, spending overnight in a hotel, figuring out how to accessing it, photographing it, feeding yourself 3 meals and coming back, it's a bargain. It's
right?
So yeah.
And you're making a donation to the rest of the world if you pay for that digitization of a book or a manuscript or whatever. Yeah.
Right. And that's something to ask about, because it does vary. I will say that my experience has been in North Carolina that for state funded institutions, by making that purchase, it is going to become available on their website. It's going to become part of their digital archive.
Yeah, so you're going to have to check with the repository.
You're going to have to check with the repository.
Everyone's different.
Because like if I do Duke University, which is a private school, then I do get access to the digitized version, but it doesn't automatically become linked to the finding aid on their page. So again, but it doesn't hurt to ask. I mean, our experience has been the same, that across North Carolina, we have definitely helped digitize materials that are now available for all of you. So think kindly of us when you look at them.
Okay.
And so following up on that, basically the other thing I want to talk about is ArchiveGrid, because basically Caddie and I were basically talking all around it without saying it, which is ArchiveGrid is a newer platform, which is kind of the equivalent to WorldCat. So where WorldCat is focusing on books for the most part, ArchiveGrid focuses on finding aids. So traditionally, if I wanted to do research at ECU, Duke, UNC, Library of all these different archives, I would physically have to go to them. I'd have to physically typically find the binders on the shelf, because there'd be shelves with binders that are organized alphabetically by the last name of the family or whatever. And I'd have to literally look through those finding aids and then try to get a copy made, a photocopy made. So this is pre-scanning and all of that. So very cumbersome. So if you did not know what archive to look at for a particular collection, you were going to have a very hard time identifying its existence. So what has happened now is ArchiveGrid has partnered with institutions, repository archives across the United States. They have worked with whatever the common sharing format is, so that ArchiveGrid is able to see what their finding aids are. Now, their finding aids have to have either been digitized or have a heading page on the website for the university. I mean, they typically have to be available by the university so that ArchiveGrid can see them. And it does take some technical handshakes. Not until last fall did actually the State Archives of North Carolina have information in ArchiveGrid. And that's because the old catalog for the old the old catalog and the old finding aid platform for the state archives was not compatible. So you're going to find that not every archive is included in ArchiveGrid, but compared to what we could not get our hands on a few years ago, this is a gem in terms of searching. And again, it's something very simple. You literally have a search box. And I always start in the search box, and then I always put in quotations, typically, whatever it is I'm searching for. And so what you're seeing here is I did Henrico County, and my favorite words, so see, I'm sharing up with you here, are ledger, accounts, lists, and membership. Because what I'm trying to find first off, typically, is some kind of document that's going to list many people from a community. And obviously what I didn't say, and I probably should have prefaced it, was you can obviously search for the family name in the county. So I could go Henrico County and then put a family name. The thing is the research I'm always doing, I have yet to find private collections for those families. So I don't often start with a family name, but that's clearly what you would want to do. You would want to search on the Tanner family. You know, if I was researching the Tanner family, I might go Henrico County Tanner. So let's work on the premise that your family did not leave private manuscripts. You're not aware of the private manuscripts, and they don't show up here. So as a genealogist researcher, my next thought is, what are the types of documents that I'm going to get the most bang for the buck for in terms of names? Now, clearly, there's going to be families with correspondence and stuff like that. Correspondence takes a long time to read through. It's wonderful, but it's hard to pick out who are the community members. It's very time intensive. But if I look for ledgers, because think of all the businesses that kept a ledger in a community. If I look for accounts, some of them just call them accounts. It's the same thing. It's their big book. They weren't keeping a ledger to keep track of their blacksmith activities. They were keeping a ledger to know who they did business with, who owed them money. So you track the money. And so the odds are that your family used the local store, went to the post office, got blacksmith services, etc. So your family may not have records that survive, but all of these businesses may document your family and their interactions with them.
You know, that's a great tip, using the word ledger. I would have never thought to do that. I would have maybe done roster or, you know, but that's more of a military thing, you know. Good tip.
I think, well, you know, for me, because since I'm the editor of the North Carolina Genealogical Society Journal, I've had some practice at trying to locate these kinds of records, trying to figure out what should I transcribe or abstract that readers want to see in the journal. And just by hit and miss, and trust me, it was a lot of miss with some hits, that I have settled on. If I want to do a quick and dirty, find out what survives, I do like ledgers, accounts, lists, and members. Because ledgers, as we talk about, and accounts bring up businesses. They have a tendency to bring up all those businesses that our family members interacted with. Lists and members have a tendency to bring up church lists, local social organizations, etc. So I've just found between those four words, if I want to quickly get a sense of, are there any records that survive that are going to name lots of names, that those four words pretty much, I mean, you know, there could be others, but they quickly tell me. Like in this case, I put ledger and I get 46 hits. If I put ledger for a county and I get 2 hits, or I put ledger and I can't even tell that there's a ledger, you know that you're not going to find a whole lot for that county in terms of original surviving paperwork. So
good stuff.
But so that's, I try, you know, I'm trying to make it, well, to me, these are just so much fun to look at. It's not even, I mean, they're good genealogically, but wouldn't you like more than the birth, marriage, and death of your family members?
Oh, yeah.
Wouldn't you like to really get a sense of?
That's why we do community research anyways, to kind of get the color, and newspaper research. Oh my God.
Yes.
Newspaper research is awesome for adding color to the family story.
And that's the thing, because sometimes, and in this case, you actually do have a chance you might find your family member mentioned, but even if you don't, you learn so much about that little community in terms of what their tastes were in anything. I mean, it fascinates me. In fact, one of the first ledgers I came across, which is what really started me in the word ledger, because it was a liquor ledger. And it was pre 1800, Burke County, North Carolina, the bigwiegs in the county. They're the only people that had surviving records. I found just about the whole community listed in that liquor ledger, let me tell you.
That's hilarious.
And the liquor ledger linked people because it listed, you know, Dan Smith, and then John, son of Dan Smith, Joe, son of Pete Smith. You got explicit family relationships listed in a ledger.
You could probably figure out how much of a liquor drinker that person was.
either how much they were drinking or how much they were using it as currency. You know? So, but yeah, trust me, and because liquor was also used medicinally, there probably was not a family that was not listed in that ledger. I want to say.
Good point.
But this is just another thing. We're still talking Henrico County. And obviously, in this case, I'd shifted to the word accounts, account book, see, farm account book, account book. But what I also wanted to show you is that multiple universities were listed. So this is still Henrico County. We're still looking at books. We have the University of North Carolina. So we have a North Carolina university holding ledgers for Virginia County. We have the College of William and Mary, the Library of Virginia, University of Virginia, etc. So what happens is, for Henrico County, I know that there are now private ledgers and account books. So these are really juicy to me at these locations, including then the Library of Congress, Virginia Tech, Colonial Williamsburg, and more. So what it has done is, in the past, we always had to go, well, if it's something that happened in Henrico County, I would look at the Library of Virginia because it's located in Richmond. And I'd look to see if there's any Henrico County or nearby repositories. What I have thought to look at the University of North Carolina. And I know that the University of North Carolina, or Duke, one of them has a huge Texas Railroad collection. Well, if I was researching a Texas Railroad, would I think to look in a North Carolina archive? Well, I wouldn't. So what ArchiveGrid has done is it has expanded our ability to go, wow, where are these collections? And then once we find out where these collections are, as Connie mentioned before, I often approach them if the material's not online and I can't get to it, and ask them, what would it cost to digitize? One ledger, one folder. And I can tell you at UNC Chapel Hill, for one folder or a small ledger, it's $31.50. I can't drive to UNC Chapel Hill and park and stay for the day for $31.50.
That's awesome.
And it becomes part of the online collection. It'll be linked to that finding aid now once it's online. And actually Duke charges comparable fees for theirs. And I know, and you know, so it's, and I've even done this at the National Archives in the Georgia, because we're part of the region has the National Archives out in the Atlanta area. I contacted them once and said, I see that you have a couple of ledgers that had to do with, oh my gosh, when you have customs, they're customs ledgers. And she goes, for $20, we'll do 20 pages. And so I said, okay, this is what I want you to do for my 20 pages. And they digitized it, and then I was sent a link and accessed it and downloaded it.
That's fantastic.
So my philosophy is ask, because you just never know
exactly
what might come up. So I just had a couple of more examples. Are you good with me doing those, Connie?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay. So what I want to show you is where Henrico, we were finding like 46 and 47, you know, ledgers. Poor Wake County, which is the county where I live, had 15. And actually, and they're not even all Wake County directly, because one is actually an Orange County ledger. So I kind of wanted to show you the other a bit, that when you're searching, you have to remember you're searching on terms that are used throughout the title and description. So what happens sometimes is, be careful that you may find, what I frequently find is Duke University is in North Carolina, for example. So I may search on something for North Carolina, blah, blah, blah. Well, North Carolina will pop because Duke University is also in North Carolina, but it may be that the ledgers have nothing to do with North Carolina. They're for another state. So and that's where I'm also pointing this out, because you want to do different terms. See, ledger only got me 15 hits, but when I switched to a different term of accounts for Wake County, notice I got 43 hits. So always remember that you want to be trying differing terms, because what you're actually searching on is the title of the collection and then the information that has been culled from the finding aid. And a finding aid is created by a person who you hope will always put at least family name, location, and dates.
Amen.
I mean, that, and I find they're getting much better that way. And a lot of finding aids by universities are being rewritten because there's some great platforms have come along to facilitate the creation of finding aids. And so it's also creating some uniformity. So that's helping us. So this is getting just better and better with time, because there's more services available to the university community. And the other thing to recognize is, I say university, it's not limited to university. ArchiveGrid can have finding aids from a local community library that happens to have private manuscripts. It can come from a museum that has a private collection of papers. So we have a tendency sometimes to think of big universities and state archives and national archives, but let's not forget that there are museums that also have their own collections of private papers. There are private homes that have their own collections of private papers. So it's just, this is just it's like a kid in a candy shop that I can now search across the country to look for something that might help me for a research project regarding someplace just down the street.
Yeah, you also have to kind of be careful not to run down too many rabbit holes, because you got to keep in mind your research question and what's your mission and what are you looking for, because it's really easy to get lost. As I was just listening to you, I was looking at that Ferguson family going, I think I need to go look at that, because that's my family.
And definitely, and I think, and that's either, as people say, a blessing or a curse for me, because since I do professional research and people only want to pay me for so much time, I do have a tendency to be very focused. But I can't tell you how many rabbit holes are hanging off on the side. And, I sometimes have to go off the clock and scratch that itch, as they say, for myself, because that's something that personally intrigues me. And sometimes that's part of our balance, is you want to get the information or do the focus to solve your research problem, but don't forget to have a bit of fun along the journey sometimes, but you got to balance it. I will do a rabbit hole now and again, because I need to satisfy my soul, as I say, in the sense of, that is a neat topic. I'm really interested in it. What can I learn? But I also have to know when to stop and put it aside and go, that's for a rainy day now.
It's funny, because I very much compartmentalize my thought process when I'm researching. And so I will, and I'm kind of on this bandwagon all the time, create a research question, create a research plan, do the research, and resolve the conflicts, all that stuff. So sometimes I'll even stick a sticky note on my desk, and this is my research question. Mm-hmm. But then I like to do what I call playtime. And it's like genealogical wandering.
Yes.
And so maybe it's getting on and chasing the little leaves, and just, let's see how many leaves I can, just play, just not focused on the research question, just kind of goofing around. And so you do have to get in there and
you'll stumble across sometimes neat things. And what I always do is, because I'm doing research for clients, and I'm also doing the journal for NCGS, and I've got these multiple hats. I'm writing articles for, I'm doing talks, etc. I may look at a resource and like you said, I've got that resource question. I've got to come back to what am I doing, but I will see something that's a flag to me because it'll be a term, a family, something. I will write myself a note so I can come back to that, because I remember distinctly there was one time I was researching a family in a county, and I'm going through the court records, linearly going through those court records, and all of a sudden I see an entry and I go, this rings a bell. So I wrote a note, what the name was, what the date, plate, all those details, and I put it aside. I had to put it aside, but I need to know where it was. And then I was at the archives. I come home, and I have a neat tool that we could probably do a whole talk about called X1 tool. I use that to search across my archives on my computer because I'm like, I know this name. I know this name. And I look and I go, oh, if it's not you. What it was is this was a person I had been tracking in court records 6 counties away and lost track of. Oh. Because all of a sudden the court records, this guy had been in court 4 times a year, every year for years. Well, guess what? He moved. And we had no record to tell us that he moved. So, but that's what I had to put it aside. At the time, I could not look at it. I could not focus at it. But with that information, I could then come back to the archives again. And then I actually pursued it to satisfy that previous scratch that I had not obviously fully taken care of.
Good trick. Good. One of the things that I'm always talking about too is, with the fan club research is, keeping track of the witnesses and the different people. So sometimes that bell will go off with me, like you said, and go, oh, I know that name. Wait a minute. And then I've got my own little system, and I'll go and pull it up, and I'll go, oh, this guy's appeared in 5 different places, newspaper articles, or whatever, and now he's showing up in this. So good point.
Yeah. And actually, if I could just add one other thought, well, I know you'll either edit it out or keep it, so whatever works for you. The thing I will caution against, and I think Connie would agree, is don't go to these resources to be fishing across every branch of your family for however many generations, etc. You need to be very focused, because I don't care who you are, you're not going to efficiently be able to research multiple surnames and families, even if they're in the same location, because their life stories are different. The train of their lives are different. The records that are important to them are different, etc. So I will go to each of these resources and I will do a surname or a family and a location. I will exhaust what I can on that, put it aside. Then if I have another research problem that I think would benefit from that same resource, I then do the same thing, but I keep it compartmentalized, because there's just no way you can efficiently really appreciate what you're trying to research, who you're trying to research, and what's going to be important to that research if you're trying to juggle all of those names in real time. But obviously you then want to document them, correlate them, and take advantage of that information. But please, 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 just don't go on these places for, I hate to say a waste of time, but I think you're more likely to find that is a waste of time than if you literally focus and come back to it. Do each one and come back.
Well, gosh, that was awesome. There's some really good information there. And I can't thank you enough. You've always got some great online resources. Most of them are free. And there's some great tips and how we can do work to help share with the rest of the world forever and ever in maybe digitizing some books or manuscripts or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't take much. And I have to say, I appreciate the chance to talk about these neat resources, because we're just all one big puzzle out there in that world. And I figure if all of us are out there supporting digitization, supporting information getting out there, sharing everything we know that we possibly can, and taking advantage of these resources, there's a good chance your research is going to help me at some point, and vice versa. Even if we're not directly connected, we're just going to be able to help one another that much better to find some of these places. And like you said, there's so much that's free that we can access. So do that, but do support them. They will always take donations, a lot of the platforms, especially what I was talking about today, because they are literally individual or small group efforts that are they're incalculable, the value that they've provided to me already. And I do that. I make little and I don't always make big donations. It's not big money that's important, but I actually every month actually do little bits of donations to a whole bunch of these websites, because I know I want them to continue to support us so that we can leave our legacies.
Absolutely. Well, you know, this has been fabulous, and I know if anybody has any questions, they can put them in the comment sections. But if they want to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
That's right. I don't know why I forget this part, but yes. You can get hold of me through two websites. My main business one is www.mosaicrpm.com. And then my second website is Tar Heel Discoveries, which is www.tarheeldiscoveries.com. The first one has information on talks I've given, articles I've written, research I've done, things along that line. Tar Heel Discoveries is a one-week program that we hope to offer again in April 2021, if not sooner. The current COVID-19 section, for those now listening to this in the future, the archives have closed across the country, including North Carolina, and so the program right now isn't occurring. And it's a one-week program that's a mix of hands-on research combined with having 2 lectures a day from experts in North Carolina records, history, and research.